All right, thank you everybody for coming to the Ultimate Yokai panel.
Thank you very much!
It's a really special event because this is the first time we have these giants of yokai studies together on one stage, I believe.
Yes. It is the first time, yes.
First time.
We've tangled online many a time,
we have,
never on the stage.
Yeah.
Thank you to our friends at the Japan Foundation in New York. They are sponsoring, making this all possible today. We are so pleased that they are also filming this today to be part of their YouTube channel, where they have several great videos about Japanese culture. This will be one of them. So thank you, Japan Foundation, for your support. Let us start by having the panelists introduce themselves because we can't assume you know them after all. Please, Matt, please start.
I'm Matt Alt. I'm the co-author of Yokai Attack, the Japanese monster survival guide, and its sequels, Ninja Attack and Yurei Attack, together with
Hiroko, Yoda. Yes, well, I was practiced to introduce myself first, and so now I'm clearly off. Anyway, I'm Hiroko Yoda, co-author of those 3 attack series. I'm so excited to meet you all.
But you guys do way more than that. Come on.
Okay, yes, it's true. We do more things than publish a book in 2008. It's hard to believe it's been 15 years since Yokai Attack came out, but we got into writing books as a sort of side endeavor from what was then our main business of localization. We ran a localization company in Tokyo for many years that specialized in video games mainly, but also in manga and books and all sorts of things. And then we got into writing our own books, and we'll get into more of that later, I'm sure.
Yeah.
This is amazing just because I loved spooky stories ever since I was a kid. And I grew up with it. Yogege no Kitaro, I'm so sure we're going to talk about it later. I loved yokai, but it's a Japan thing. And then, so when, right before we started writing Yokai Attack, I told Matt that I think yokai are really fun, and then everybody would love it. And as long as we give some kind of a context, and then we can share it to people abroad. Look at this. This is just amazing.
Excellent, excellent. You knew that yokai would leave the boundaries of Japan and take off around the world.
They were prepared to have their moment.
They totally were. But it's hard to believe there was that kind of that before and the after, you know?
Oh my God, compared to now, it's insane, yeah.
But wait, who are you?
I'm Zack Davisson, and I don't know if Matt remembers this, but once very, very long ago, I was in Japan on the JET program, and trying to decide what I wanted to do with my life. And I wrote him out a little email saying basically, how can I be like you? And he very kindly responded with the advice that I would now give other people is just do it. Like, you want to write a book, write a book. You want to do this stuff, do this other stuff. And it was very nice of you to respond. I have to say, you probably don't even remember it, but I did. And so I just did it. Like, cause they came out with Yokai Attack and Yurei Attack, and then I was just like, at the time I was doing my master's degree in Japanese religious studies, focusing on ghosts and Yurei, and then I wrote my first book on Yurei, which was at the time I had thought I was going to become a very serious academic. Obviously I did not, but originally that's sort of this path that I saw for myself. And then I realized that wasn't a path that led to either fun or profit and didn't seem like a very good path. So I decided to do something else, which is that I always felt like, because when I first started writing my books, I felt like people like Michael Foster, there was already academic yokai really covered. And I thought Matt and Hiroko had owned the sort of pop culture area. And so I thought I had room for a middle road, for a middle path in there that was yet some territory that I could do, so that's where I tried to sort of establish myself. I am a translator as well. I always hate the word localized, I don't know why, because I was a translator, I don't know why. But I translate the works of Mizuki Shigeru, including his works Kitaro, which is one of the most famous comics to ever come out of Japan that is entirely unknown in the West.
Yes.
Like, you know, in Japan it is a titan. It is the, like, you know, the people that write your favorite comics that you think are awesome would bow at the feet of Mizuki Shigeru, you know. And so it's been like my lifelong passion to try and bring his work, his often unappreciated work, to the West, as well as I do a lot of lecturing. I've
It's like
taught.
Taito Kubo came to San Diego Comic-Con a couple years ago. This is before Drawn and Quarterly published Shigeru Mizuki in English. And we asked him, which manga did you love to read when you were a kid? And he said, Gegege no Kitaro.
Yeah, it's the foundational manga of a lot of manga artists. Go Tanabe, when we were in San Diego Comic-Con, said the exact same thing. I also now do some other, like I do a lot of lectures, so I've actually taught at colleges I'm not qualified to attend. So I've taught at Duke University, lectured on manga localization. I also teach a lot of folklore classes, like I've taught at UCLA, I've taught at Annapolis Naval College, which is still weird. And I also, for other reasons which I don't understand, I also currently write the X-Men for Marvel Comics, so, which is weird, but true.
I want to switch slides really quickly, but this is very, very important. There is a survey. Our friends at the Japan Foundation have very kindly supported this panel. So please, while we chat, scan the thing, do the survey. We will love you for it.
Seriously, like, and then we would really appreciate it, because this is like, your response on the survey will absolutely determine if you get more of this awesome stuff, you know? I mean, especially bringing in someone like Matt and Hiroko, so. I'm here anyways, so it doesn't
Yeah,
matter.
I mean, we're just, you know, we only come when you call us,
Yeah.
like a yokai. You have to summon us from the wilds of Japan, like a Pokemon or something.
We'll flash it at the end as well, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys got a chance to fill out the survey, because it really, really is important. All right, so as Zach said, yes, they have met before.
Look at that, oh my God, I was so skinny.
10 years ago.
Mizuki, my wife, don't look at that slide. She'll remember how skinny I used to be.
This was in Seattle, I believe.
Yeah,
we
that was in
were just
Seattle.
on a stopover going through, and I was like, let's go meet that monster I created.
Yeah, no, seriously. Like when we met, I had not even published my first book at this time. All I had was the proof copy.
Oh,
of
wow.
it. Yeah.
Wow.
So what a long, strange trip it has been.
Indeed.
For the Grateful Dead.
All right, so let's take it back to where it all
Look how
began.
happy we are.
Technically.
We're still happy. Yeah.
And you guys are happy now.
We're happy.
You guys are.
We're always happy.
You guys are spoiling for a fight, aren't you? Jesus. Let's talk a little bit about Yokai Attack, please.
Do you want to talk about Yokai Attack? Oh, you talk.
No, I have.
I can talk about it.
Yeah, why don't you just talk? Well, you're so qualified. So no, here. So Yokai Attack came about in a very specific way, which is that Hiroko, as she said, has always been interested in spooky stories and yokai stories and folklore ever since she was a little girl. But there wasn't really a lot available at the time when we were in the process of thinking. We weren't even thinking about writing the book. Hiroko's like, yokai, I think you'd really like this. She is the one who taught me everything that I know about yokai. And I think it started when you took me to Tono, the famous, the northern village in Japan that was famously studied by a Japanese folklorist named Yanagita Kunio in the 1910s, who wrote a book called The Tales of Tono.
I was driving the car, and I saw the Tono, town of Tono, and the navigation, and I was like, look, there's a famous town called Tono. It's a legendary place for folklore, especially yokai. If you like kaiju, you will like yokai. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning. Because before we published Yokai Attack, the yokai concept, everybody knows in Japan. Everybody knew. But almost nobody knew outside the world.
I want to interject that I grew up in Hawaii, and I'm Japanese American. I'm fourth generation. I had never heard the yokai.
The term yokai?
We talked about obake stories.
Right.
We didn't really.
Yes.
Which is another word. We'll get into that.
Yes.
But there's like yokai. There was yokai in Hawaii. Like there's like the famous faceless woman
The no perago.
in the bathroom of the Waialae Drive-In.
I love these stories.
There's lots of Japanese ghost stories
Yes.
in Hawaii.
Well, and also, I was going to say, translation had actually stripped yokai out of a lot of properties before
Right.
then. Like if you look at Rumiko Takahashi's series, Urusei Yatsura alum, it is a yokai comic, but you would never know that by the English version because they carefully removed all of that.
Yes.
Because the word yokai wasn't used. Japanese were actually feel probably insecure about it.
Oh, really?
Yes, and then we always used, the people used monsters,
Or demons.
demons, and then just never...
Ghosts.
Yeah, ghosts.
Yeah, they use that sometimes too.
And then, so those words really didn't capture what yokai meant. And then that's why we published the book, Yokai are yokai.
Yes, and actually this is an interesting kind of a sidebar here about localization. Sometimes the best way to translate a term is not to translate it at all. We don't call sushi raw fish on rice. We don't call samurai old Japanese soldiers. We call them samurai. We call these things sushi because they are cultural concepts that have a lot of context embedded in them. And when you translate, quote unquote, yokai as demon, you're adding baggage that it doesn't have in Japanese. You know, demons are a Judeo-Christian sort of thing. So Hiroko and I were really adamant about making yokai yokai, never translating as anything else. And we actually got into big heated discussions with the editor and the other production staff at Kodansha International at the time. Should we do this? Should we not do this? Maybe we should only have monster on the cover. But even monster has a certain amount of baggage in English that yokai does not. So that was 2008, and Yokai Attack, we have since heard in the years after that, has given a lot of strength, is this the word I'm looking for, to other content producers in Japan. We heard from like the Yokai Watch people. They ended up hyphenating it because they still wanted to get a little, you know, trademark copyright on it. But yokai, it started to kind of take off after that as a word.
It's amazing. So now we have
this is Yokai Watch.
discussion.
Yeah. Yokai Watch, yes.
When I first started working in yokai too, I long made it one of my goals is to get the word yokai into the English dictionary.
Yes.
It is not there yet,
Not
but
yet.
it will be. And on that day, just know that is a stated goal of everyone on here.
We need to all vote whenever they have the Oxford English Dictionary has. I don't even know how words get in, but
I don't know, but they put in they put in a couple other Japanese words recently that it just kind of made me angry because they put in like silly stuff like ikigai and like all those pop culture words. I'm like, come on, yokai is still on the table.
You'll know it has happened when you get text messages from friends saying, go look at the answer for Wordle this week.
Right?
Oh, Wordle.
Oh, yeah.
I got like all these text messages, people like, manga's the solution for Wordle this week.
Oh, the New York Times.
So that might happen for yokai because it's a 5-letter word, eh?
And that's true. Introducing a new word into a language, one of the wonderful parts is as a translator, you still get paid, even though you didn't actually translate the word, so that's awesome. But it's also a process that you have to do. And like I also fought with my editor when I was translating Kitaro, and I was entirely insistent on keeping the yokai names, because before that, like Nekamusume had been translated as cat chick.
And Wally, wasn't
Wally
really,
Wall.
The wall, Nurikabe was Wally?
Wally Wall. It was literally Wally Wall. Yeah, it was awful. And so, but I had to fight with my editor. I'm like, look, we're gonna keep the yokai names as they are. We're gonna keep the word yokai. It's not gonna be goblins. It's not gonna be any of that. And I was absolutely insistent on it. My argument was like, they were like, well, it might be hard. I'm like, if 1 million people can learn to say Pikachu, they can learn to say, you know, Medama Oyaji instead of Daddy Eyeball, or Nezumi Otoko instead of Rat Guy, or whatever awful names they were, you know.
Rat Man, actually. It sounds like Batman.
It does,
It
right?
makes him sound
Rat
cool,
Man,
and he's not a cool character, but yes.
And
anyway.
I think it's interesting because I was talking to the esteemed and venerable and very wonderful Fred Schott, who I'm looking at right now. Hi, Fred. About his also fighting with his editors about using the word manga in the cover of his first book. And I realized that when you make a concentrated effort to introduce a new word into English, it is not smooth. You know, it does take effort.
Yeah. And just to quickly wrap up the Yokai Attack talk, the reason that it is presented in this format is very simple. It's a survival guide, and we wanted to get as much information about these creatures, for lack of a better word, as I could even call them yokai, as possible. And so we put it into this sort of pattern because in 2008, there was a big boom for survival guides happening. Max Brooks, the son of Mel Brooks, had published a book called The Zombie Survival Guide, And Hiroko and I were like flipping through this and like, wait a sec, because we were trying to figure out, you can't just throw this information at people. You have to give them something to hold on to. And so the idea that these things were out there and hiding and might be, out to get you was something that we thought a survival guide format would.
But we didn't really want to make it survival guide because yokai are not, they can be trickster animals, tricking us. They can be mischievous, but they're not really antagonists. And we wanted to convey that. We really wanted to, what Japanese feel yokai are, we wanted to share it. So even though we used a survival guide, but if you read it, you can't really survive.
When you said that last night, I realized, and I'm looking at this page right now, there is no tips on how to survive a kappa attack.
That's on the next page. No, we did get complaints from people.
Complaints from people. Yeah. This is survival guide, but I cannot survive. And that's the point. It's just please make a friends with yokai.
Yes.
Well, and I think you guys were so brilliant in doing that because it's not like there weren't some books before, but they didn't gain any traction. Like Katrina Ross's book. There's a couple others that I know that I'd read when I was trying to desperately find anything on yokai. And by doing that, by making it pop, you gained so much more traction than anyone else had ever managed to do.
Well, yeah, and also cataloging yokai is kind of key, right? Like everybody wants to make a catalog of yokai. That's how they were originally consumed. We'll be getting into this in the Edo era. In times of old, yokai were often seen together. So it's nice to kind of put them in a format where you can turn the page and see the next one and the next one. So those were kind of the things going through our head. There were nothing in English in 2008. How do we contextualize this? We found a really great manga artist through Friends of Friends. His name is Tatsuya Morino, and he's the one who drew this. Morino-san has a really interesting backstory. He, in high school, he ran away from...
elementary school.
Oh, elementary school, that's right. He ran away from home and went to Mizuki Shigeru's house and knocked on the door and said, "Give me a job." And
that's chutzpah.
It's pretty hardcore. And Mizuki, back in time, now manga artists are usually, they're really kind of shy about putting their names, faces, even sometimes their genders out there. They really like to kind of maintain that privacy. But back in time, that was not the case. And the manga magazines would actually publish the home addresses of manga artists.
Yeah. So that the little Morino-san, so that the back of the whatever that he grabbed, then it's just Mizuki Shigeru, and then there's an address and phone number, and then he just decided to go because he told me that he thought that this is my dream job. And of course, his parents are worried about him.
Yes.
How old was he in elementary school?
Oh, he was elementary school.
But that could be arranged from 8 to 12. Or
of course.
Yeah, but I don't know exactly how old he was.
But Morino-san told me that the Mizuki Shigeru-san's wife actually called
his mom.
His mom, and then don't worry about your son. We got him.
That's so wholesome.
Yes.
It is, yeah.
And he's actually the last.
So after he graduated from high school, Mizuki said, "You got to go home. You got to go to school." After he graduates from high school, he shows up at Mizuki's door again and saying, "I need a job." And Mizuki's like, "Okay, you graduated," and he did give it to him. So Morino-san actually worked as Mizuki's assistant for many years, late 70s, early 80s, I think, around that time frame. So it was great to get to work with him because we didn't have to explain anything to him about what's a yokai. What we did have to explain to him is how to appeal to Westerners. So there's a lot of ones in there like where they're...
Westernized.
Yes, we had to Westernize some of, not the yokai themselves, but for instance, there's one called Futakuchi Onna. It's a woman who has a mouth on the back of her head in addition to the front, and you'll see woodblock prints of her feeding herself using kind of prehensile hair and like taking foods and sticking them into the mouth.
One of them are hamburgers.
And so in our book, we actually replaced all the foods with Western foods, hamburgers, things like that, to kind of make it a little bit easier to understand.
But I think the hardest one I would say is man-made objects, yokai.
Tsukumogami.
Oh, I love those.
Now today, you guys know, expert in the characters. Even though the man-made object,
Kochira.
Actually, those are
That's
examples.
That's umbrella. Yes, definitely. And today you guys know, but back in time, it's just object, umbrella. It doesn't have. Why? So, but if you show that the illustrations, umbrella, even one tiny eyeball, the Japanese would think, oh, that's yokai. But back in time, nobody knew what yokai were. So we had to make sure big eyes.
Right.
And then just they had something going on with this man-made object with umbrella, and that kind of thing. If you flip through Yokai Attack, and then if you happen to find man-made objects,
You'll see a lot of Western ones.
It's big mouth, big eyes, and then so that everybody can understand what they are.
They're really charming illustrations.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
They are lovely.
Let's talk about Zack's yokai book
Yes.
next.
So this is my most recent book, The Ultimate Guide to Japanese Yokai. And this was an interesting one because this was a commission, essentially. The publisher asked me to do a yokai encyclopedia. And I was really, I just felt like at this stage in the game, there was nothing new to be said. It felt like there are already, like when we first started writing, you could go to Amazon and type in the word yokai and you would get exactly 2 hits. You would get Michael Dillon Foster's book, Pandemonium and Parade, and you would get Yokai Attack, right? But now you look, and especially with Amazon's ability to self-publish, there is an absolute, library of yokai encyclopedias. And I was like, what is the point of another one? And so what I tried to see, just like what I had done before when I started my writing career, is what is uncovered ground? Like, what else is there? And I noticed, especially in academia, that the focus on yokai recently has been to narrow the definition of what is a yokai. You see a lot of academics will be debating, is a baku a yokai? I don't think it is. Is a yurei a yokai? And so it's been the fashion of the day is to narrow the field, right? To really drill down on what truly is a yokai. And if you look at it historically, in the Edo period, how they approached yokai, that was not how they did it. It was everything's coming up yokai, right? I mean, it didn't matter. And that was also how Mizuki Shigeru approached it. He's like he did a translation, not a translation, an adaptation early in his career of H.P. Lovecraft's The Dunwich Horror. And inside, Cthulhu, yokai. All of he literally calls them yokai inside the book, because there was not this idea that you had to somehow narrow the scope. It was this idea of that every monster, that yokai was such a broad general term that everything mysterious, everything wonderful could in fact be yokai. And so I took that different tactic with this book. And I was like, one of the big questions that always gets asked all the time, are kaiju yokai? And so I decided to answer that question yes, and make the first yokai encyclopedia with an entry in it for kaiju. Specifically to annoy these two, just so you know.
I can see you fidgeting.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And I put in there in my book, one of the things is I consider this book more of a discussion. And so I have my thoughts about it. I have the arguments against it. And as a reader, you can choose what you think or what you don't think. I personally believe that there's no real difference between yokai created by Toriyama Seiken, who created a lot of yokai, versus a yokai created by Toho or something like that, right? And I think that most of it's just a barrier of time. One is a couple hundred years away, and so it has entered the pantheon. In another 100 years or so, another 200 years, maybe there will be no question that kaiju are in fact yokai. So I'm like, somebody's got to be first, and here it is. Yeah.
Can I say?
Of course. Jump in.
So the yokai are okay. I have a script there. So the yokai are mythical creature of Japanese folklore. And that's the beginning. It's a characterization of unexplainable things. And then back in time, of course, nobody knew what they were, because yokai were just oral traditions. So, but they are actually a term. They're not just yokai. Yokai, mononoke, bakemono. That's shapeshifters.
Yeah.
This one.
And what was it?
Ayakashi.
Ayakashi. And then they are slightly different, but they're pretty much the same. The Murasaki Shikibu, the author of the Tale of Genji.
You don't have to do it.
She used the term mononoke, so that's how old the tale of Genji, the tale of Genji, the era where she lived.
Well, actually, they don't. It's probably 1,000 years old. It's considered one of the first modern novels.
So even though she didn't use yokai, but she shared the same concept with us. But of course, at that time, no one knew what they were. And then artists started drawing scrolls, and then it's become like characters. And then now, oh yeah, that's a parade of yokai of wedding. But just to know that Japanese believe that the palanquins, the yokai carrying the palanquins, or the lanterns have the eyes. They don't believe that. It's a parody. They enjoy it. It's just like we do today, and that's really the beauty of the yokai. We share the same thing that had many years ago, hundreds, 1,000 years ago.
And I love how we haven't got past the book introductions. We've already ruined Deb's plan.
Yes. It's all, no.
We did this at the last panel.
Actually, it's interesting. It's interesting what Hiroko just brought up, because yokai are kind of a tool for communication. They're actually almost like a time machine. They allow us to interact with people a long time ago, because we see the same images they do. We find them amusing in the same ways they do. And so that aspect of the communication aspect of yokai was another big reason why we wanted to write our book. And this is where we differ when it comes to kaiju. And here's why. If you go to Japan and you use the word yokai to describe Godzilla, you will confuse people, because they know that as a kaiju, and they're totally separate sorts of things. So the reason that we were being so strict about the definition of what a yokai was in our book wasn't so much to say, you're wrong or you're right or anything like that. It was, if you were communicating with a Japanese person and you use the word yokai, what's going to float into their mind is something like this. Or a kappa, or a tengu, or a mythical creature from Japanese folklore, more than something like Godzilla, which is a product, basically. It's an entertainment product. It is also, Godzilla is copyrighted. That's another big difference between yokai and kaiju. Kaiju are all copyrighted because they're all the property of corporations.
But the concept of kaiju is not. Those particular ones are, but the concept, like you see kaiju in movies all the time, showing up like even in like Suicide Squad or Pacific Rim. I mean, so it's not about Godzilla being a yokai. It's about the concept of kaiju, and that's one of the things I think about yokai.
Was the concept of kaiju predated movies?
So I just did a whole lecture on it today, so yes, I know way too much about that now because I've been studying about it. So the concept of kaiju, it transformed through time. Originally it was just a general word that came from China, meaning strange beast, which is all it is. In the Edo period, it's often used in the same connotation, like kaiju will be used as without any sort of definition. Like it's just like, I saw one of the earliest known use of kaiju is this dude walking through a mountain. He's like, I tried to walk this path, but then a kaiju appeared and I left. And we have no idea what it was. It's just, that's the only word that was used. Later on during the Meiji period, kaiju started to get applied to monsters of foreign origin, specifically used in a book where there was legends of like a surviving dinosaurs in the Yukon of Canada and things like that. And then that first appeared when the movie Beast from 20,000 Fathoms appeared into Japanese. It was given the title of Genshi Kaiju Adawaru, or the Atomic Kaiju Attacks, and that kind of cemented this kaiju term as the giant monster.
Sure.
So, please, dozo.
So if we talk about the kaiju, then I think we should define what kaiju means. Kaiju today means Godzilla, big monsters. But when you mention the kaiju in Edo era, old time, that means you have to know what Japanese character means. Kai, in that term, is mysterious, unknown, unexplainable. And the Ju is the beast, mysterious beast. So it totally makes sense that when you walk in a mountain, in Japan, the mountain is the spiritual realm. And just any mysterious thing possible to happen. So it totally makes sense that somebody wrote it, I encountered kaiju. So I totally get it where you're coming from. But I really think that if we started talking about it, I think we should define what kaiju means so that we won't fight each other.
Oh, I totally agree. Like what it means now, and that's one of the things about the concept of yokai is that, and this is one of the things I talk about in my book, is that one of the names for yokai is changing things, obakemono, right? And changing things change. The yokai of the early period, like the Mononoke, they are not the same thing as the yokai that know now, because when artists started to define them in the Edo period, they started to add and create and generate new yokai. Like, not all yokai have folkloric provenance. Not all yokai have some sort of, they weren't often stories told around the campfire or passed down. A lot of them were simply created by artists trying to sell you stuff. Or a writer trying to sell you stuff. And frankly, I think that's beautiful. Like, I love the fact that many of these yokai were simply made by one of you, an artist alley, putting up a thing and trying to sell it. And someone liked that enough that then someone else copied that. And like, to me, like, that's what makes folklore. It's not the origin, it's the transmission. If I tell you a story and it ends there, that's not folklore. But if you then tell that story to another person, that person tells that is how it comes to folklore, regardless of the origin, regardless of why and who made that. And it seems to me like kaiju as a concept, once again, not as a copyrighted monster, but as a concept, is now in that stage. We have cultural transmission of the concept of kaiju. We have seen kaiju leave what it was originally created for, and now has generated a new monster for a new millennium, a new concept, all right? And so that's how you get films like Pacific Rim using the word kaiju. You know, that's how, like, if you say kaiju to someone now, all of you will come up with the same thing, this giant monster.
So
and
basically, kaiju is Loch Ness Monster, and Dracula is yokai?
Well, no, see, that's the other thing, is that,
Just ask
like,
him.
when Mizuki,
That's Yuma.
yeah, when Mizuki Shigeru wrote his book, The Great Yokai War, it was his entirely 100% original creation yokais fighting against Dracula, Frankenstein, and a witch. And nobody debated that was not yokai because it was called The Great Yokai War. And there's actually books from that era that are called Seiyo yokai, or Western yokai.
Sure.
So I think that you know, once again, I understand everyone, your point of view too, but I just feel like I said, the fashion of the day has been to narrow.
Sure.
But if you go back in time, you find that it was wider. And that's why when I did my book, I felt like, why do another one of those?
Right.
You know, why not throw the gates open, you know, and see what happens.
Personally, I believe that the power of the yokai is just, there's no correct answer.
Oh, 100%.
There's no correct answer. And then today it's not, I agree that the yokai are not just mythical creatures of the folklore. Today we have pop culture, and as you guys know. But the thing is that, okay, wait a minute. Because I'm focused too much, I kind of slip. Yes, the yokai. The power of the yokai is that there's no correct answer. Anybody can create their own, and that's the. I don't want to use radical, but the radically inclusive. Every idea, all ideas are welcome. And then there's one example, Amabie. Amabie. And then Amabie is an old,
100, so she was 18, it was 1846?
Yeah, 1846.
What's the math? Somebody do, what's 2024?
1846 was many years ago.
Yes,
Many.
Anyway, the Amabie came up. That's the old newsletter.
Newspaper.
A newspaper, I mean the newspaper. Newspaper.
Edo Substack.
And
Broadside.
Anyway, the police.
An officer of the law is reported to have seen Amabie, this creature, appeared over the waves in Kyushu in 1849. It was at night, it manifested over the waves, and it uttered this prophecy that if plague should come, show my image to the people.
Yeah, there's abundant harvest.
Yes, and there will be an abundant harvest.
If there is a plague, draw me and show it to the people. And that's what he drew.
So this is like a policeman who drew this.
But anyway, it's in that newspaper, kind of forgotten. And then COVID-19 hit. and somebody on the Twitter world found that article. Hey, I found this old art in Kyoto University. And so I'm going to show this to the people and see how it would happen. That went viral. It is all over Japan. And then, of course, it's a Twitter world, so that the people abroad started adapting it. And then I was really surprised that the kids, I'm talking about foreign countries, outside Japan, kids drawing amabie, they're baking cakes shaped like amabie, they make a sculpture out of
They
it.
probably made sourdough bread out of it.
Sourdough
Yeah.
bread.
Pretty
amabie.
It's a concept is the same, but ideas are, it's just, it's a
Transmitted.
It transmitted, and that's the beauty of yoga. It's just everybody's welcome, and in your idea, kaiju is welcome.
Kaiju have been transmitted. Yes, now we agree that kaiju are yokai. Thank you for using amabie to prove that.
I did want to mention something that makes yokai unique, and that is the spiritual worldview of Japan. And I thought things have a soul that I thought was so
Why don't you
fascinating.
talk about this?
Like
Why? Okay, so
May?
yeah, dozo.
Go ahead.
I have a script. I have to read this. I want to make sure. So in times of old, Japanese thought everything around them had a spirit. Sky above, clouds, wind, the rocks, ground, even the words we speak, emotions, and man-made objects. And that is, that worldview is known as animism. And that idea is that there are many spirits in the world around us. And this is the foundation of Japanese spirituality, and it is also the foundation of the spiritual tradition of Shinto. But this leads, some people think that yokai are Shinto, but they are not. Yokais are not Shinto. They come from the same worldview, but they are not religious at all. I just wanted to clarify.
Except, of course, when they are.
Yes, because there's
No,
always
it's
an exception.
conception.
There's
It's
always
a
there's always
conception.
exceptions.
But
Yes.
but that's basically why even the trash cans or the police box or the characters that when you come to Japan, characters are everywhere. Like that. That's one is a tsunami warning, and then another one is the do not get closer to the water pond.
Otherwise, the kappa will get you.
Yes.
Yes, and then in a police box. And in Japanese don't believe those have a spirit. We don't believe the kappa really exists. But those are kind of the difficult, like a warning. It's just you gotta have it.
Japan is often portrayed as a conflict-adverse kind of culture. But in any kind of large numbers of humans being around, there's always going to be some kind of conflict or difficult subjects to talk about. In Japan, characters often play the role of mediators in situations where you don't want to talk about it openly. And these characters often take the form of anthropomorphic objects. So for instance, you'll go into a drugstore and there will be a giant anthropomorphic poop drawing telling you this is where the laxatives are, because nobody wants to go in and say, I'm all stopped up,
I thought it was related to Japan wanting to make everything cute.
But this is the cuteness is for that. Or a police box. Japanese kids are not naturally going to want to run up to cops for their authority
For good
figures.
reason.
So they try to kind of humanize it, make it more approachable. You see this all over the place, and it's often done in situations where there's some kind of resistance. Now, the question of why Japanese love anthropomorphizing things, why they put eyes on the police box, why they put eyes on a tsunami. Everybody in Japan knows how terrible tsunami are. Tens of thousands of people died on March 11th, 2011 when a tsunami hit the Fukushima area. So it's no joke. But Americans looking at this might be like, wow, this is so condescending. Why on earth would you put a smiley face on this horrible, horrible natural disaster? But it's just because nobody wants to talk about or even think about natural disasters that they came up with characters like this. This is the local government, came up with a character to catch your eyes and get you to think about, are you prepared for the next tsunami to come?
Yeah, so the amabie, we showed you before, it's the poster right next to that, that's a Japanese government poster. It's a government. government was using yokai mascot. And then, so that shows you right there that it just grabs attention. It's like, ooh, what's going on?
Right.
And then you realize there's some kind of a warning or be awareness. And that's the role of the characters,
Yes.
mascots, yokai, play.
Is
in
Kumamon a
imagination.
yokai?
Kumamon is not a yokai. Kumamon is a mascot. Here, the fight starts up again. Kumamon's going to come smashing to the
I
wall
actually
now.
have a fun example. Cookie Monster. I always bring in
Oh.
Monster. Okay, Cookie
Here we go.
Monster a yokai? And the answer for that, Cookie Monster are not yokai because it's copyrighted. But
Right.
forget that.
Yeah, put that aside for a
Forget
second.
the part. But if Cookie Monster name is capital C, Cookie Monster, that's only one. So he's not yokai. But if small letter C, Cookie Monsters, and then then probably he's a yokai.
Yeah.
Maybe it just came up to your house and then just quietly eating the cookies. That could be yokai. And
He's a personification. If he's a personification of the lust you feel towards
Towards cookies.
for baked goods, then he is a yokai.
he's a yokai.
So one thing I wanted to add, because I think it's really interesting to know also in addition to what Matt's saying, is this is nothing new of Japan. If you go back to the 1900s and see the Spanish flu epidemic, they were actually using yokai then as well on
Yes.
posters at children. So this is pretty like, this is the deep magic of Japan. They had like the yakubyogami, which are these diseases of our yokai, or I guess, how would you call it, disease gods? I don't know. Anyways, basically, you would see kids coughing, and the illustration showed the yakubyogami coming out of their mouths, and they had this old Japanese folk hero called My Lord Bag of Rice coming up to do battle with them, as the penicillin shot and everything. And so this has always been Japan. This is not a thing of the modern era.
No, and even before that, there was a measles epidemic
measles,
in
yeah,
the
yeah.
1860s, and there's this whole strand of Japanese art called measles pictures, and it's all measles is yokai fighting oni, which are another type of yokai.
I
and things like that.
actually
But
saw the ukiyo-e about cholera.
cholera.
And then it's the ukiyo-e is basically chimera.
Woodblock print.
Yeah.
Woodblock print. And then the body of the tiger with some kind of I don't know the.
Well, they use a nue, right?
It was a new light.
Yeah, knew it
picture,
like
yeah.
knew it
Yeah.
like.
But then I love the fact that that picture is actually an advertisement to sell you this cure against cholera. So once again, commerce is a massive driver of the creation of yokai.
Yes. Yes, and actually, we're all drawn here today because of our love for Japanese characters. And most of the characters that we're consuming at an event like this are copyrighted, corporate characters. But why? Why is Japan so great at making these characters that, grab hearts and change minds and, all over the planet? The answer can be found in the fact that they have such a long history of creating and merchandising characters. And if you go a couple of
Our guy.
Japan in the 1700s, by the late 1700s, already had a thriving publishing industry and a highly literate populace in its cities. And these were people who had an almost incandescent hunger for stimulation and entertainment and escape, kind of just like us today. And one of the big ways they found that escape, there are all sorts of ways they found that escape. Kabuki plays, dancing, drinking, things. The more things change, the more they stay the same. But books were another big way they did that. And in the 1700s, there was a huge boom in Japan for encyclopedias. Encyclopedias of all kinds. Medical encyclopedias, encyclopedias of foreign knowledge, mainly from China and Korea, encyclopedias of local knowledge. And a gentleman by the name of Toriyama Sekien hit on the idea of, hey, what if I make an encyclopedia of something that's completely imaginary? What if I make an encyclopedia of yokai? And that's exactly what he did. In 1776, right around the time a gentleman by the name of George Washington was taking the oath of office in America, he published this book called The Illustrated Parade of 100 Demons, and it became a massive bestseller in Japan. This was a really interesting development because until this point, yokai art had all been on scrolls or paintings, one-of-a-kind things, one-off things for the the gentry, for the aristocracy. This was a book that anybody could buy. It's the first mass-produced yokai product, and arguably it's one of the first mass-produced Japanese character products of all kind, of any kind.
Well, and as the first yokai encyclopedia, it is also the first Pokédex.
It is, absolutely. Absolutely.
100%.
So
It is.
This is why even today, when you look at yokai books, Zack's book, our book, almost anybody's book, it will be in the form of an encyclopedia because people love reading about them in their context of their habitats and where they're from and what their strengths, their weaknesses, or whatever you have it are. So Sekien was the first person to do this. He took inspiration from centuries of Japanese yokai folk tales, art, not even Japan, China, Korea, wherever he could, compiled this book. These are actually, so Hiroko and I found mint condition copies of them in the Smithsonian Institution at the Freer and Sackler Gallery in their archives about 10 years ago. We couldn't believe it because they're very tough to find in Japan now. Even though they were mass produced, it's been 240 years. How long has it been since George Washington was president? That's how old these books are, and they just happen to have perfect copies. And that led us to attempt a translation of them, which came out in 2016 under the title of, it's not in print anymore, so we didn't put it in here. Japanimonium Illustrated, but I don't think it's in here. But anyway, the point is,
it's in my other one.
The point
Yeah,
of
we
this,
don't want to boast our books aren't in print anymore.
yes, well, the point of this,
It'll come up.
it'll come up. The point of this is that Japan has this rich tradition of making, merchandising, and then mass producing characters. These are the roots of everything that we are consuming here at this convention today.
Yeah, when we
You
translate
can find it on eBay.
Unfortunately out of print. This is a translation of Sekien's encyclopedias. It took us several years to do. It was hell because it's handwritten, archaic Japanese. We had to work with a lot of experts to help us decipher, to translate it into modern Japanese before we could translate it.
And it's not just words, but also all the illustrated, the stuff that he incorporated in his illustration.
Yes.
Because before Toriyama Sekien published that the encyclopedia, yokai are drawn in mainly scrolls, and it just usually standalone characters.
Against a white background.
White background.
Yeah.
But what Toriyama Sekien did, that he gave yokai backgrounds, and
and he put them
like
in
backstories
the
or
current
something?
living world.
Yeah, and it happens
Before
but
that, the scrolls were just sort of mystical
Yeah,
other worlds.
you can see in here, this one on the left is called a net cutter, and it's a creature, you can see it's cutting the mosquito net at somebody's house. So it gave this kind of reality to the yokai that they hadn't had before.
And I called it the Toriyama Sekien's codes because I started noticing when we work on the translations, I started really staring at his illustrations all day, every day, and then just trying to figure out why he put little tiny flower on this spot kind of thing. Because I found out that there's always reasons, and then that's why I wrote some kind of
Right. Well, we have an analysis of each one of the drawings along with the translation. So if you can find the book, that's great. We're actually working on getting it republished in a new repackaged way, but unfortunately,
because the stuff that he drew, it's basically what the Mizuki Shigeru drew. The yokai
He inspired many.
It's many, and then because the yokai boom kind of died out. And then the post-war era, the great manga artist came, Mizuki Shigeru.
Here he is.
And then the Gegege no Kitaro, it's basically I grew up with. It was a huge hit in an anime.
Yeah. So Mizuki Shigeru he's my guy. I love him. And he's the thing, so when I first went to Japan, who here's been to Japan? Okay.
oh wow.
Wow.
More people should
Okay.
go. It's cheap now.
So back in the ancient times when you had to take a steamer ship across, like when I first went. But anyways, first time I went to Japan, I was kind of like, I like to say I was like you, but so many of you have been to Japan. But I was the Japan guy. I had read the manga, I had watched the anime, I had eaten the sushi, and I thought I knew what Japan was like. And then I got to Japan and I realized that I knew nothing about Japan. Like everything I had learned, everything I thought I knew about Japan, absolutely none of it was real. Because what I had watched was a highly curated picture of Japan that was sellable to Westerners. And so I had bought it thinking that it was real. And then I go to Japan and nothing was like I thought it was. Like even like the popular comics that I thought I was like, oh, I'm gonna bond with my students because I love Cowboy Bebop. And you go to Japan and they're like, what the hell is Cowboy Bebop? Yeah. Sorry, bud, never heard of it, you know? But what was everywhere was Mizuki Shigeru. Like his stuff was just all over. And it astounded me that someone clearly, so obviously monumental to the culture of Japan was entirely unknown over in the West. It would literally be like if you had a Japanese person come over and be like, God, I love American animation. I am such a huge fan of American animation. And they're like, and you say, oh, do you like Walt Disney? And they're like, who? Sorry, not familiar with the name. Like that's literally what it was like. And I just became fascinated to how there was this massive blind spot. And the more I learned about Mizuki Shigeru, the more I realized what an absolute pillar of everything that we live in today. Like Mizuki Shigeru was the very first person to pit a giant robot against a giant monster in his comic book, the Kaiju Dabang. You know, I mean, like a lot of these concepts, like sort of like all these sort of big, even stuff like Pokemon and the Pokédex, like he was the birth of all of this stuff. And so I just became super fascinated with him. I mean, not the birth, I would say not even the birth, but he's the torchbearer. Like the torch was passed down from people like Sekien, you know, right, over to someone like Mizuki. So, you know, and he sort of reignited that torch again and reignited that love for yokai and reinvigorated it. And one other thing that Mizuki did that was really innovative in his books is when he started publishing his comic series Kitaro, which was his little yokai boy, he then started putting in the back things like yokai files, these little sort of like supplemental features that would you know, explain a bit about the yokai. And then he started putting in like little quizzes so kids could like study and learn and become a yokai hakase or a yokai professor. And so we kind of got people invested in this concept of like learning more about, like, not just enjoying them as a character, but actually like, oh, I want to be a yokai hakase. You know, I want to learn this. I want to take the quizzes. I actually in my
But I want to interject here and say, for one thing, good news. Those days when Shigeru Mizuki's books are not in English are gone.
Yeah.
There is actually going to be a book, an art book of yokai coming out this fall. Yokai, the Art of Mizuki Shigeru, from Drawn and Quarterly. Please check it out. It is like a coffee table version of Yokai Attack. It's really great.
It's really beautiful.
It's a really, really nice book. The other thing I wanted to impress upon you is the fact that Shigeru Mizuki did all of this with one arm.
Yeah, he was a World War II. Yeah, he fought in World War II. He lost his arm fighting on the Isle of Rabaul. And he did all, like, you know, he came back. And the other thing, and this was what personally inspired me when I learned about Mizuki Shigeru, is because when I went over to Japan when I was 33 years old, right? So I was pretty old for a jet at the time. And I was like, you know, I was like learning Japanese and learning more about him. And then I realized that he had published his first comic at 40 years old. And I was like, that was a personal inspiration to me, because I'm like, I'm not done yet. I still got a chance to do this. And so that's when I started to drive towards making my own mark in the world, you know, publishing my own comics was inspiration for him.
I'd like to encourage all of you, if you're yokai fans and you go to Japan, don't just go to Tokyo, Osaka, Kyoto. Please make the time to go to Sakai Minato, which is in Tottori Prefecture. Yes. I went there, and it's Mizuki's hometown. There is a Mizuki Yokai Road, which little statues of all the yokai.
The creatures, yeah.
And then there's a museum, and if you go there, he has his collection of all of his folklore things that he got from his travels around the world, different masks and different, you know, different kinds of folklore, because he was really fascinated by that. But the one thing that struck me about this, and I wish I don't have my photo of it, is there's a framed white t-shirt in the museum, and it has all these little ink marks on the shoulder. It's because he would draw with one hand and he would wipe his pen on his shoulder. So if you please, if you go to Japan, please make the time to go there. There is actually this ramen shop there that has this, that has this fish ramen that I just dream about. It's so good. And it has like a yokai, Shigeru Mizuki yokai toppings, but it's super tasty. I would go back just for the ramen. Anyway.
It's really interesting that you mentioned about the yokai, the Mizuki Shigeru Road in Tottori, because after we published Yokai Attack in 2008, I got a phone call from the person who works in the board office in Tottori, and he called me. I saw your book, Yokai Attack, in English. We can market people abroad. We talked on the phone for 1 hour, and basically he was just like, I can do this, we can do this. You give me so much courage. So I said, go for it.
See?
So now you said that, and you guys are sitting in it here, and that's really fascinating.
There's other reasons
That's
to go to
fascinating.
Tottori. There's a Conan museum, Detective Conan. There's a Gosho Aoyama museum.
But also, we appreciate you not going to the Conan showing down the hall. And
It is a crowd.
Thank
Anyway,
you.
Tottori is slept upon. Go there. Food's awesome. There's some good hot springs. You won't regret it.
And we do have 7 volumes of Chitaro published in English currently, so by all means check them out.
Q&A?
I don't know, yeah. maybe we
Well, I
should.
wanted to, but I also
We
want to
have
say,
5
like,
minutes.
there's also stuff like, this.
That one.
Like-
yokai. So let's talk a little bit about yokai in modern moment, modern moment, because Mizuki passed away about 10 years ago now. It was
2018.
less than 10 years ago, although it feels like 10 years ago. But he was already kind of in his decline by that point. The modern yokai, there's a lot of modern yokai stuff that's been either directly or indirectly inspired by him. Yokai Watch we spoke about earlier is one example. Another is where you just had the image of it up. Mononoke. This is a movie that has just come out this year. It's beautifully animated. It features, it's like set, the illustration style looks like old woodblock prints, and they use textures from Japanese washi paper. It's a very unique looking animation, but you can see that yokai lore and yokai material is still just as popular and relevant today as it was back in 1776. It's really interesting. Yokai never really die. They just kind of bide their time.
Sounds like a theme song of the Mizuki no Kitaro.
Right, exactly. No, it does.
Exactly.
And so it's just, they just kind of bide their time and wait for the next generation to discover them. And the next generation always seems to, because yokai are awesome.
Yokai are awesome.
Are we going to do our self-promo
All right,
thing?
so-
we do have 5 minutes, so maybe
Once
less.
again, if you didn't take the survey, I'm going to pause here for a second. Please share your feedback. We'd love to hear it. We'd love to do this again. And or not just a yokai panel. We'd love to do more panels with Japan Foundation. So please, share your feedback. It does count.
Or the yokai will haunt you.
Yes.
We really appreciate your support.
Matt, where can we find you after the panel?
Well, I'll be just sitting up here for the next 10 or 15 hours. No, I'm just kidding. You can find me online. I think there's actually...
Yeah, there's a slide for it. That was my
Is there
cue.
a slide? That was your
All right,
cue?
I'm going to do it.
This is me. You can find me online. I just started a YouTube channel. It's Matt Alt. Please, by all means, subscribe. I'm talking about all sorts of Japanese pop cultural things. Hiroko, where can we find you?
Right there. No, is it?
Right there.
Right there.
You can find her. You can talk
You
about
can find it
it.
right
You can talk
here.
about it.
Yeah.
I just started newsletter. And so if you look it up, the hirokoyoda.com, the blog hirokoyoda.com, I think.
I think so. I think so. You should know this. It's your
Insights
newsletter.
about
If you
current
are
events in
interested,
Japan.
it's called Japan Happiness. I'm writing about a lot of Japanese culture, traditions, and history in English, not Japanese. So if you are interested, please subscribe.
She's working on a wonderful book, 8 Million Ways to Happiness, that's coming out in 2026.
Yes, I just finished my first manuscript. It's written in English. It's my memoir, re-engaging in Japanese spiritual traditions after my mother's passing. And yeah, it will be published in probably New Year's in 2026. Stay tuned.
Nice.
And Zach.
You can find me in Artist Alley at booth D02, where I have exactly 4 copies of my book left. You guys apparently love my book, so thank you very much. Because you bought all of them before, so if anyone wants to run and get those. But yeah, so come see me at my booth. I know we're out of time for questions and stuff, but like if you guys want to ask questions, you're more than welcome to come talk to me. I don't know if you guys want to.
And we're also going to be
Yeah.
at the Kinokuniya booth at 6 p.m. signing copies of our book. so we will.
Yeah.
Please
You're
follow our
your
friends.
own
I sell my own books. I'm not yet a publisher's
We're such
booth, you
slaves
know, I
to-
know,
And if they're
right?
going to pimp their shit, I'm going to pimp mine. Please listen to Manga
Do
Squid.
it.
We love Manga Squid. We are going to come up with season 5 pretty soon, and our first episode is covering Manga by Fred Schott.
Yeah.
I look forward to it. It's an hour and a half. It's a chunker.
Yeah. And manga explaining is, by the way, awesome. Like literally everyone. Deb is such a titanic force for manga in the world, and I love that podcast. So you should absolutely listen to it.
Anyway.
Sorry we didn't have time for questions, but
Yes.
you can approach us anytime online. You can even approach us in real life.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.